Current scholarship on Islam in Indonesia often focuses on the way people in positions of power, such as politicians, have shaped Islam. Much of this scholarship takes Indonesia's independence as a platform for discussing the transformation of Islam in Indonesia to what it is today. Indonesia declared independence in 1945, and Sukarno was appointed president. He ruled Indonesia through strict enforcement and was superseded by Suharto. However, Suharto's new order was not as democratic or desirable as the people wanted. In 1998, Suharto stepped down after many protested. The president is now elected by the people. But from the beginning of this political process, parties were formed which would become one of the shaping forces of Islam in Indonesia. Many of these political parties began being formed when Sukarno came to power. 10 of these parties involved in the formation of Indonesia's political parties were focused on an Islamic state. And after Suharto's fall, over 40 parties were formed with an Islamic basis. These parties and their leaders are often looked upon to explain the way in which Islam operates in Indonesia. Many of these Islamic parties want Sharia or Islamic law to be incorporated into the constitution, but in the same breath, they do not agree with how particular practices should be incorporated into the constitution. This disconnect between each party's different view concerning incorporating central practices of Islam, such as prayer, into the constitution, reveals the mutual influences between those in power and those who are navigating the power. Political power is at play in people's practices, but this is not the full story. For example, those mosques that identify with the NO party will perform 23 prostrations during Ramadan, while mosques that identify as Muhammadiyah or other Islamic parties will perform 8 prostrations. In order to understand and represent this complicated relationship between people's practices and politics, I will look at a particular example from my fieldwork done in the summer of 2011. An informant speaking about his religious background said to me that the traditional Sufi orders are backwards and hold people in poverty. This conversation took place at a state Islamic institution in central Java, where this individual was considered a political activist who was still unhappy with the government which was under the hands of the NO political party. He believed that they were not helping people and that their Islam was not informed by science. At the same time, this individual asked me to meet his Sufi guru back home. This same individual who told me that the guru's practices were backwards was now explaining that this guru was right and that the guru's practices were beneficial. He would go to the guru's house and perform a particular practice with him whenever he went home. And the individual would also perform some of these same practices in his urban modern home. This individual embodies the perceived power dynamic which is in place. Official Islam, which is a part of these political parties, is presented as a driving force that is possibly tainted but not affected by older Sufi practices. However, the practitioner displays that the people have mutual influences on them. The same recitations which happen in a wooded hut in a small village are also being performed in the largest mosque in Southeast Asia. This example reveals the breaking down of boundaries. The perceived tensions between popular, elite, urban, rural, traditional, modern are only at the surface level. Islamic politics have shaped the way in which people see themselves as Muslims. But the practices also reveal that there are mutual influences and mutual power dynamics affecting the history of Islam in Indonesia. Islam in Indonesia, as well as in the world, cannot be defined by the people in power because the practices reveal the fluidity of power which is perceived.